In the 21st century, dating websites have become an ever more frequent way that people find their significant others. Since their advent, there have always been people willing to use them for nefarious reasons. From trolling and catfishing to finding victims to be fleeced of cash and assets, there are plenty of people and profiles to be careful of when romantically searching for love. But what 38-year-old mother of two Sarah Mayhew found wasn't a catfish or a con man. What she found was worse by several orders of magnitude. This is the terrifying and brutal case of Sarah Mayhew, and this is Murder of Crows. On the outskirts of London is the historic town of Sutton. Sutton got its name from the Old English sut and tun, meaning south farm. Mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086 as having 2 churches and about 30 houses, its location on the London to Brighton Turnpike from 1755 led to the opening of coaching inns, spurring its growth as a village. When it was connected to central London by rail in 1847, it began to grow into a town, and it expanded further in the 20th century, where it became part of Greater London in 1965. And it's to Sutton in 2024 that we will go for the tragic events of this sordid tale. By 2024, Sarah Mayhew was 38 years old and had 2 children aged 12 and 15. We don't know exactly when, but it was a couple of years earlier that Sarah had met Steve Sansom on a dating website. He must have made some kind of favourable impression, as the two would remain in contact sporadically in the following months and years until 2024. But Sarah clearly had absolutely no idea of the monster that Steve Sansom actually was, and indeed what kind of monster he had formed a very toxic relationship and arguably a folie à deux of sorts with. A woman named Gemma Watts. To fully understand what happened to Sarah Mayhew, we need to first look back on the past of Steve Sansom and the start and evolution of his relationship with Gemma Watts. In 1998, Steve Sansom was just a rebellious and homeless teenager aged 17 who did not care who he offended, hurt or damaged in any way. It was on Christmas Eve of 1998 that he took things a step further. On that night, he attacked 58-year-old Terry Boyle, who was a cab driver, and he took £25 from the cabbie. But rather than beat the man up and rob him, Terry was knifed in the throat, and while he managed to stagger to a nearby home in the hope of getting help, he collapsed and died on the doorstep before first responders could reach him. Terry's wife, Emmeline, said that her husband had been working overtime to earn enough money to buy the children Christmas presents, including a BMX bike for their 11-year-old son, Matthew. At Sansom's subsequent trial, it was revealed how he boasted to friends about the attack. Prosecutor Mark Dennis told the Old Bailey in 1999 how Sansom laughed afterwards and told a friend his kids are going to have to see him in hospital over Christmas. Terry Boyle, a quiet, gentle, unassuming family man, crawled dying from his cab after Sansom stabbed him and robbed him of just £25. Sansom admitted murder and robbery, and he apologised to the court for what he'd done after pleading guilty. At the trial, it was revealed that Sansom had told friends that he needed at least £300 to buy Christmas presents and would do anything for money. A few hours later, he bought a kitchen knife, saying it was a present for his adoptive mother. Sansom ordered a minicab to take him home from East Croydon. Terry Boyle, who was married with 2 sons, had worked night shift for the same cab firm for a number of years. The prosecutor said he was described as a well-liked, intelligent man, never confrontational or aggressive. Sansom directed him into a cul-de-sac where he inflicted a deep and severe 12-centimetre cut to the right side of his neck. Terry was also stabbed in the head and arm and had several cuts on his hands where he had tried to defend himself. Bleeding heavily from the neck wound, he collapsed and died on the doorstep of a nearby house. Sansom, covered in blood, went to a friend's house and apparently boasted that he had stabbed the man 6 times and nicked his money. He had then cleaned his knife and counted out the stolen money. Brian Barker, QC, defending, said that Sansom was immature. He had been rejected by the regular army after it was discovered he had a heart murmur. Many of the remarks he had made were the reaction of shock and or immaturity. Sansom received a life sentence and an 8-year concurrent sentence in a young offenders institution. And Diane Kendall, boss of the Croydon cab firm where Terry worked at the time, said he was a lovely family man and a model cab driver. In 4 years, we never had a single complaint about him. As I said, Sansom was jailed for life, initially in a young offenders institution, having been 17 when this happened. After being sentenced in 1999, he was eventually released in 2019 on life licence, meaning he would need to be subjected to community supervision for the rest of his life. Fast forward to 2023, and in the August, Steve Sansom began a relationship with Gemma Watts, and from the word go, their relationship was based on a sadomasochistic sexual union. A video from around this time shows Steve Sansom hitting Gemma Watts with a wooden spoon, leaving her covered in marks. Later messages from Watts state that she's suffered physical pain, but that she liked being hit by Sansom, and their dangerous sex games would only intensify over time. And this is underlined by a note that Gemma Watts wrote in September of 2023, with this note reading, "I, Gemma Heidi Watts, write this on Tuesday 5th of September 2023 at 10:40 a.m. I am writing this of my own free will. Should any serious injury or even death occur whilst I am with Steve Sansom, let it be made fully understood that I enter the act of violent, dangerous sex games with Steve Sansom of my own free will." As disturbing as this is, it is thought that Sansom still had occasional contact with Sarah Mayhew at this time. But the nature of their relationship at this time has never been revealed or uncovered. Following the note written by Watts in early September, within days of this commitment, conversations between the two were becoming extremely sickening. Sansom sends a voice note around this time saying, "Everything looks like meat now, don't they? A plaything, something to cut, something to bleed. They all look different now." And Watts replies, "I wonder what they taste like, cooked flesh." Sansom replies, "People taste like pork, consistency, texture's the same." A message from around this time suggested that Sansom was willing to die together with Watts if the pair were ever caught. Whatever the nature of Sansom's interactions with Sarah Mayhew at this point, it became clear around this time that Gemma Watts was growing angry with her. And after Sansom and Watts had postulated killing Sansom's friend, Watts soon turned her attention to Sarah Mayhew. This was emphasized by interactions between Watts and Sansom on September the 18th, 2023, with Watts sending Sansom a screenshot of a conversation with Sarah Mayhew discussing when she will pay her back. Watts jibes that she won't ever talk to that skank again unless to say R.I.P. And Sansom replies, "Wow," followed by 3 knife emojis, with Watts saying, "Yeah, she's going on my list." Later on, Watts says Sarah is pissing her off big time, and that she has just a lust to stab a skank. And it may have been just dark fantasy at this point, but the exchanges between Sansom and Watts continued to sink to depraved depths, with the two almost egging each other on. An example of their interactions in late September 2023 would be with a message from Watts to Sansom reading, "Why do I walk around now looking at people different? Little kids look different. Babies, all people, I see them and picture how they would look begging for life. Or cute little clothes torn and little limbs covered in blood, twisted and broken." Watts then said it makes her feel powerful, hungry for it, horny, different to everyone else. And then in another voice note, Sansom says, I love how you are. I love how fucked up we both are. No shit. Jesus Christ. From October of 2023 onwards, Gemma Watts was becoming a more and more regular visitor to Sansom's flat on Burnell Road, with neighbours not only noticing the woman being there more and more often, but also noting the regularity of what sounded like rough sex. Neighbours spoke to police, and Watts would be referred to as the short woman called Gemma who would walk her dog in the garden. And in terms of reports of rough sex, one neighbour recalled hearing a whipping sound followed by a whimper. Although this neighbour ultimately thought there was no cause for concern. Okay then. By November of 2023, it seemed that the pair were getting ever closer to taking their apparent lust for murder into the real world, with Sarah Mayhew still the focus of their attention. In that November, they seemed intent on luring Sarah to Sansom's flat. Watts and Sansom discussed trying to get Sarah to visit the Burnell Road flat. Watts said Sarah won't leave in one piece, and Sansom agreed. Sansom suggested slitting Sarah's throat over Watts' face, with Watts replying, "Have you even got the tools? Want you to cut her throat?" And it's thought that this fantasizing continued unabated over the next few months. And alongside this, Sansom made continued efforts to engage with Sarah over WhatsApp and Facebook, with a view to engineering a get-together of sex and drugs at his flat. On March the 1st, 2024, Sansom sent Sarah a message saying, "I'm having a little party on my own and I'm horny as fuck. I've got white but no dark. Call me ASAP." And later saying, "I've got money for dark but I can't get it. Fancy a little party." Later that evening, he presses her again, writing, "Please call. I'll wait until 2200 hours to start my party. After that, we both miss out." While there was no get-together that night, it seemed that Sansom's persistence paid off, in the sense that Sarah Mayhew spoke with Sansom several times over the course of the next week. At 8 or 9 p.m. on March the 8th, 2024, Sarah tells a friend that she's going to visit Sansom. At 8:15 p.m, Watts and Sansom are captured on CCTV entering the flat at 15 Burnell Road, and Sansom calls Sarah Mayhew at 10:42 in a conversation which lasts 21 seconds. At 11 p.m, CCTV captures Sansom and Sarah walking towards the Burnell Road flat and entering. She's wearing a long, thin beige coat with a pale scarf around her neck, black trousers and black boots, carrying a rucksack. Her blonde hair is tied in a ponytail. She was never seen leaving the flat. It was later proposed that Sarah Mayhew was attacked with at least one knife in the kitchen lounge area of the flat rather than the bedroom as they had proposed before, and that the bathroom was used during the cleanup. Watts would later tell a prison inmate that she was the one to slit Sarah's throat. In a message to Watts, Sansom tried to justify the murder, with him saying, "We're not evil, we're not evil, we done the world a service." At 8 a.m. on March the 9th, Watts is captured on CCTV walking her dog from the front door of 15 Burnell Road around the front of the property to the passage that leads to the garden. A neighbour says hello to Sansom from his driveway, with this neighbour later recalling that Sansom seemed chirpy. It was either on March the 9th or 10th that Sansom and Watts decided to begin cutting up her body. Shortly after 11 a.m. on March the 10th, Sansom bought a 300mm hacksaw, a 300mm blade and a 14-litre bucket from a nearby B&Q. And although a black bucket was found, the hacksaw and blade were not recovered and must have been disposed of by the sick pair. Watts was still in Sansom's flat at this time. At 2:18 p.m. that afternoon, Watts disposed of something in a bin. And this wasn't one directly outside 15 Burnell Road, but rather was on nearby Lewis Road. On March the 11th, 2024, Sansom and Watts were spotted leaving the Burnell Road address at about 11:20 a.m. and Sansom was carrying a bright blue bag and Watts a coloured bag. It's unsure whether they disposed of some of Sarah's remains on this trip, or whether it was just a scouting trip, but it was believed that they were carrying some of her body parts at this time. They took the number 154 bus and then tram to Addington Village, the stop closest to Rowdown Fields. CCTV footage captured the pair struggling to carry the bags. Sarah's head and body parts were later discovered in Rowdown Fields. At 1:05 p.m, 25 minutes after getting off the tram, they were seen on CCTV again at Applegarth School, which Sansom had attended as a child, moving in the direction away from the deposition site. The pair then took a bus to Watts' home in Holmbury Grove off Featherbed Lane in Forestdale. At 1:30 p.m. they were seen entering, and Watts was still carrying the large blue bag, but neither had the other bag. At 3:30 p.m. they were seen leaving. Watts was still holding the blue bag. 2 hours later they arrived back at 15 Burnell Road in Sutton. Also on March the 11th, and on 2 separate occasions the same evening, Sansom and Watts scattered more of Sarah's remains in the River Wandle near Goat Road, Mitcham Common. There they were seen by Carl Johnson, Sansom's acquaintance, who thought Sansom seemed less talkative than normal. Funny that, isn't it? Sansom claimed he'd been walking the dog all day and asked whether there were any other parks around there. Johnson said that the pathway he was facing led to a main road. Watts looked at the ground and kept her hood up while the conversation was taking place. Sansom and Watts then walked toward Goat Road and stood at the river bank for about 10 minutes. Just before 9:30 p.m. they returned to Burnell Road. Around 90 minutes later, Sansom, Watts and the dog were seen on CCTV leaving the flat. At this time, the suitcase that Sansom was dragging appeared to be particularly heavy, and he also has a white bag. and it's thought that this trip marked the end of the disposal of the remains, and the remaining task was a clean-up. So on the afternoon of March the 12th, Watts bought scourer pads, bleach, blue wipes and washing up liquid from Poundland on Sutton High Street. Sansom went to work on this particular day in Surbiton, having made arrangements with his boss that morning. On March the 14th, Sansom and Watts left Burnell Road and went to buy a silver incinerator bin from King's Corner store. It is believed the couple spent a few days cleaning up the murder scene. A mechanic who rented lockups near Sansom's garden noticed white-coloured smoke coming from the area, giving off a very unpleasant smell, with Watts saying to the mechanic, "I'm sorry about this, I won't be long," heading back and forth from the house to put items into the burning metal bin. Watts then messages Sansom to mention that she had been noticed during the burning of evidence, and it's unknown what precisely these items were. In late March to early April, a neighbour noticed an acrid smell coming from the corner of the garden. This lasted for about 2 days. Sansom and Watts once again went to New Addington on March the 22nd and 23rd. Sansom used his phone around Rowdown Fields, but it's not known whether he visited the site of Sarah's remains at this time. 3 weeks after Sarah Mayhew went missing, some of her remains were discovered in Rowdown Fields. By who, you ask? Say it with me, folks. A dog walker! Apparently his dog showed interest in the long grass at the tree line running parallel to Kent Gate Way. The walker walks closer and sees what he believes is a human thigh. He called the police, who arrived at 9:15 a.m. This local led officers to an area of Rowdown Fields closer to New Addington roundabout. One officer noted that the bone was cut very cleanly. The walker then tells police he did not see the body part when he last walked through the area on March the 31st, 2024. At 9:40 a.m. the next day, police dogs express interest in a metal sheet about 200 metres from where the thigh was found. Here, Sarah's lower limbs, forearms and another section of thigh were found, all decomposed. The body parts were found in a black, white and red fabric laundry bag. Police suspected that the initial thigh bone was also ditched under the metal sheet before being moved by an animal of some sort. About 3 hours later, police conducted a wider search, and Sarah's head was found in a large overgrown area of thick brambles. On the evening of April the 2nd, 2024, Watts and Sansom find out their burial site of Sarah Mayhew has been discovered. They continued their sadistic behaviour, showing no remorse or regret about murdering Sarah. Watts was in Swindon and wrote in a message to Sansom at this time, "Why did it start when I'm so far away from you?" And he responded with a voice note saying, "Baby, the circus is in town. When the circus is in town, there are clowns everywhere and the party starts." On April the 4th, 2024, forensic experts used dental records and DNA swabs to link the remains to Sarah Mayhew. On April the 7th, forensic pathologist Dr. Matthew Siecker found bruising to the scalp tissues and fractures to the voice box. But he could not confirm a cause of death, and no further examination was carried out. Among the more significant findings were dismemberment with separation of the limbs and head, advancing decomposition of remains, bruising to the scalp, bilateral thyroid horn fractures, which are fractures often sustained following prolonged compression, either manually or from ligature. However, the mechanism of compression is complicated by the fact that in this case, the overlying skin and muscular tissues were absent. And then also apparent bruising to the inner aspects of both ankles. No obvious brain injury was identified, but the time taken to find the head affected this examination. On the evening of April the 5th, neighbours heard shouting and loud music from Sansom's flat. They heard one female and two male voices. Just before 10 p.m, Sansom takes a picture on his phone of Watts with facial injuries, and these can be seen in her police mugshot. Roughly 3 hours after the photo was taken, police executed a warrant at Sansom's flat. He was arrested on suspicion of murder at 1:15 a.m. and taken to Lewisham Police Station. Watts had left the flat before police arrived, but decided to return to Burnell Road at about 3 a.m. When she walked up the driveway, she was stopped by police who asked her, "Do you live here?" And Watts replied, "No, my boyfriend does. It's Steve. He lives in flat 2. And when police mentioned the injuries to her face, she is quoted as saying, "Steve did it. We like to have kinky BDSM sex, and I like to be punched in the face." Later the same day, police arrested Watts at her home in Holmbury Grove, Featherbed Lane, shortly after 3:45 p.m. Police interviewed Sansom 4 times on April the 6th after making the murder arrest. At first he told police he'd only heard about Sarah Mayhew's murder in the press. He then says he met Sarah on dating website Plenty of Fish, after which they had sex once or twice. Sansom continues his attempt to deceive police, claiming he had seen her 18 months earlier and that during their fling she never went to his home in Sutton. Throughout the same course of interviews, Sansom said that he and Gemma were friends who have sex once in a blue moon, the last time being earlier that year. There is a mountain of evidence, but Sansom continued to make denials. After being arrested, Watts told police that she got her head injuries following a row. She also told the custody sergeant that she had bipolar disorder and psychotic episodes and took medication. She was then interviewed twice on April the 7th, where she declined to make a comment. But when sat alone in her cell at 9:30 a.m., she began harming herself. Police physically restrained her, and she had suffered an injury to her temple, as blood could be seen dripping down the tiles. Custody Sergeant P.S. Holtham then heard Watts muttering to herself, appearing to speak to someone who wasn't there in the cell, with Watts saying, "She deserved it anyway, dirty crackhead." On April the 8th, Watts spoke to a specialist registrar after multiple episodes of self-harm. The registrar asked about Watts's suicidal feelings. She said she heard a voice in her head telling her to do bad things. And then Watts added, "I killed someone, or at least I watched someone be killed." Sansom was charged with the murder of Sarah Mayhew at 1:17 a.m. on April the 9th, 2024. Watts was charged later the same day. On April the 18th, 2024, police carried out a forensic investigation of Burnell Road in Sutton. After Sansom's arrest, police began searching the Sutton flat. Police dogs directed officers towards contents in the Hoover and behind the kitchen/lounge skirting boards. Forensics found that blood had seeped behind these skirting boards, and this blood was later matched to Sarah Mayhew's DNA. Blood stains in the bathroom sink and on the sofa bed were then attributed to Gemma Watts. On May the 20th, contractors were working at a lake off the River Wandle near Octavia Close when a worker spotted something 15 to 20 meters from the bank. He believed at this time that it was the remains of a rotting dead goose, so thought nothing of it and continued working. But the next day he was using a machine to remove weeds and dredge sediment, and he used the weed rake to lift this item out of the way. And it was then that he discovered that it was actually the remains of a human torso. And police arrived to retrieve it shortly afterwards. A DNA match on May the 24th connected it to Sarah Mayhew. On September the 26th, 2024, Sansom pled guilty to murder and perverting the course of justice. And then on November the 21st, 2024, Gemma Watts pled guilty to murder and perverting the course of justice. The pair were sentenced at the Old Bailey in London on January the 30th, 2025.
Stand up, both of you. Stephen Sansom, for the murder of Sarah Mayhew, I sentence you to life imprisonment. I set no minimum term in your case. That means that you will spend the rest of your life in prison. For perverting the course of public justice, the sentence is 5 years imprisonment concurrent. Gemma Watts, for the murder of Sarah Mayhew, the sentence is one of life imprisonment. You will serve a minimum term of 29 years and 90 days. Thereafter, it will be for the parole board to decide when, if ever, you should be released. If you are ever released, you will remain on licence for the rest of your life. For perverting the course of public justice, the sentence is 5 years imprisonment concurrent. You may go down.
And that was the very recently wrapped up case of a young mother of two who happened to cross paths with a pair of depraved individuals who egged each other on to find a victim. She was a victim of circumstance and paid for her choices with her life. And both before and after her death, her body was treated with a cruelty that indicated little remorse. Sarah Mayhew was very much loved by family and friends. This video is, of course, dedicated to Sarah Mayhew, and I send love to those that knew and loved her, especially her two children. I truly hope that she is at peace. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. Please like, share and subscribe as a birthday present to me. But with that said, I'm Steve. This is Samson. And we will see you when we see you.